Hello dear aspirants. Next topic of discussion is constitutionalism. This is also one of the basic concepts which we will discuss in detail. So what is constitutionalism? Before knowing constitutionalism, we will try to understand what is a constitution. So what is a constitution and why do we need a constitution? What is a constitution and why do we need a constitution? So for any basic question, we need to ask these basic questions again. So for any basic concept, we need to ask these basic questions: what, why, how. So as part of that, we need to ask what is a constitution. So in simple terms, constitution is a rule book. Constitution is a rule book which consists of the basic set of rules or fundamental principles for guiding any country. Means how the government is to be constituted and how it is to be governed, how the state is to be constituted and how the state is to be constituted and how the state is to be governed. So for this there are certain basic rules should be there. There should be certain basic rules upon which the state is to be constituted and governed. So therefore, constitution in simple words is a rule book. You may ask, certain countries do not have a book because constitutions world over are two types: written constitutions and unwritten constitutions. So written constitutions, we have a written constitution. Like USA and India's case, we have a written constitution. Most of the world's constitutions are written constitutions. There are, in certain countries, there are no constitutions that are written. So for example, UK. In UK, they don't have a written constitution, they have unwritten constitution based on conventions. So therefore, constitution is a rule book which sets the basic guidelines for the polity to play in that particular state or country. So we'll see the constitution is just like any other law, but it is the highest law of the land. The constitution is the highest law of the land, highest law of any country. In any country, there may be n number of laws, but the constitution is the highest law or the supreme law of the country. Constitution is the supreme law of the country. It should be and it ought to be an organic document. Organic means which evolves itself. It should be a holistic document covering comprehensively all the aspects, and at the same time it should be an organic document, which is a living document. It's not a it should be able to change itself with respect to time and space. With respect to time and space, it should be able to change itself. So this is the constitution. What is a constitution means? In simple words, it's a rule book. For example, if you are playing a game, something like a cricket. So ICC has a huge number of, a huge book meant for cricket itself, a huge number of rules, many number of rules are there for a simple game of cricket. Therefore, in order to run a country like India with vast diversity, we should also have a rule book. So that rule book is called constitution. So in order to play some game, we have a rule book. Similarly, in order to play the polity in the country, we need to have a rule book that is called constitution. And why do we need a constitution? What happens in the absence of constitution? Why do we need a constitution? Why do we need a constitution? Is because of, this was beautifully summarized in the NCERT book, Indian Constitution at Work. I thoroughly suggest you to go through these two basic books for polity, political theory and Indian Constitution at Work. Both are very well written and it will see how it summarizes the essence, why we need a constitution. So the point number one is to achieve the basic level of cooperation and assurances. To achieve the basic, to secure the basic cooperation among all the citizens. We are a diverse country. In order, oka chinna group lone so many differences will be there. So in a country, huge country, a vast country with huge diversity, there is bound to be number of obstacles, a number of differences of opinion. So in order to achieve a secure basic cooperation among all the diverse groups, we need cooperation. So we need a constitution. And the second reason is we have already discussed, it is a rule book. Then what kind of rules should be there? What kind of rules should be there and who will decide those rules? who will decide those rules? Because as a group, I want certain rules, you want some other rules, but there should be some sort of consensus. So the decision making, the second point is to decide who is going to make the rules. To decide who is going to make the rules, there should be some constitution. And the third reason why do we need a constitution is so who will make the decisions? The state. The state means the governments. The state means the governments will make the rules, we know. But the rules, can the government make any rules whatever it likes? No, isn't it? It cannot make arbitrarily the rules for its own sake, because at the end, on the receiving end, who are going to be affected? It is the people, our citizens. So the government should have powers, so limited powers. So the government's powers must be limited. It should not be unlimited powers. Government should not have unlimited powers. Government's powers should be limited. Similarly, another important point, why do we need a constitution, is because to provide a fundamental identity to the people. There are two kinds of identities. One is a political identity, second thing is a moral identity. Political identity and a moral identity. So moral identity was beautifully enshrined in the preamble itself. We have so many moral values inscribed in it. Similarly, political identity, the citizenship, Indians as citizens, Indian state, that was the how did we get? We got all those after we enacted our constitution. We got our value system. And similarly, one more point was there. What is that? So to achieve the basic cooperation, secure the basic cooperation and the decision making, a limited power, and to provide the fundamental identity to the people. And we have one more, to fulfill the hopes and aspirations. To fulfill the hopes and aspirations of the people, of the citizens. Because to fulfill their hopes and aspirations, we have opted for welfare state. So to fulfill their hopes and aspirations, so in order to achieve all these objectives, we need to have a constitution. So in this, within the constitution, having a constitution is not equal to the, or not amounts to the constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is slightly different. We will discuss, but remember this point, limited power of the government or the state. So which we will discuss here under constitutionalism. Now come back to the actual concept, what is constitutionalism? So what is constitutionalism? In order to have constitutionalism, the first prerequisite is to have a constitution. We have just now seen, what is a constitution. Now we'll see to have a constitution in the first place. Asal constitutionalism undalante constitution undali in the first place. We should have a constitution. Not only having a constitution is enough. Constitution unte saripodu, but the government or the state should be run according to the constitution. So the state should run, or the government should run according to the constitution. This is the second thing, is the government, there should be a constitution. This is a prerequisite. Without constitution, we can't have constitutionalism. But constitutionalism, though, if we have a constitution unnanta matrana constitutionalism untadani mana cheppalemu, but constitutionalism undadaniki constitution matram undali. So first we should have a constitution, and the second thing, the government should run according to the written constitution. Manam already raskunna constitution prakaram akkada state function cheyali. But how this state should function means it should not wield unlimited powers. It should have the third point which we have discussed under constitution. The state should have limited in powers. The state or the government, we are using synonymously here. There is slight difference between state and government, because the government is just one aspect of the state. The state has 4 characteristics which we have discussed in the previous topic. So where their state has 4 characteristics, under the 4 characteristics, the most important is government. So the government should be limited. Limited government is the hallmark of constitutionalism. Limited government is the hallmark. John Locke, political scientist John Locke says that limited government is the hallmark of constitutionalism. Is the hallmark of constitutionalism. So in any country, the government should not have unlimited powers. The government should only have limited powers. In the context of fundamental rights, for example, while we are discussing about fundamental rights, which we will discuss later, fundamental rights means citizens యొక్క ప్రాథమిక హక్కులు. ప్రాథమిక హక్కులు, the state under Indian Constitution Part 3, the citizens were endowed with certain fundamental rights called fundamental rights, ప్రాథమిక హక్కులు. So under this, state gives certain fundamental rights to the citizens, but that doesn't mean they are absolute. All the fundamental rights, they are not absolute. They are restricted. You can't have absolute or 100% rights. You can have only restricted rights. No, they are not absolute. Similarly, because there are certain restrictions on, just the way there are certain restrictions on the fundamental rights of the citizens, there are certain restrictions on the state power also. స్టేట్ పవర్ మీద కూడా కొన్ని రిస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ ఉన్నాయి. ఆ రిస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ ఏంటి? లిమిటెడ్. ద పవర్స్ ఆఫ్ ద స్టేట్ షుడ్ బి లిమిటెడ్. దేర్ షుడ్ నాట్ హ్యావ్ బీన్ అన్లిమిటెడ్ పవర్స్ ఆఫ్ ద స్టేట్. ఎందుకంటే స్టేట్కి అన్లిమిటెడ్ పవర్స్ ఉంటే ఎవరికి డేంజర్? సిటిజన్స్కి. దేర్ ఫండమెంటల్ రైట్స్ మస్ట్ బి కాంప్రమైజ్డ్, బికాజ్ ఇఫ్ ద స్టేట్ యాక్ట్స్ ఇన్ arbitrary manner, the fundamental rights of the citizens will be compromised and they will suffocate. So therefore state only should have limited powers. So that concept is called constitutionalism. Constitutionalism means state should have limited powers. Why it is required means, just now we have discussed why constitutionalism is required, because if the state assumes all the powers, unlimited powers, it will be dangerous for the citizens. So the state, as Karl Marx says, state is the march of God on earth. Ante bhoomi meeda it is the shadow of the God, means state is like God, which means God is all powerful. All powerful means he is omnipotent. He can do everything, anything and everything. Similarly, as the shadow of the God, state can do anything and everything. State has, we may all have guns, but the biggest gun is with the state. So state can do everything and anything, so which will be dangerous for the citizens. Therefore, so state should have only limited powers. That concept is called constitutionalism. Constitution ఒక్కటే ఉంటే సరిపోదు, దాని కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ప్రకారం రన్ అవ్వాలి గవర్నమెంట్. అట్ ద సేమ్ టైం ద గవర్నమెంట్కి లిమిటెడ్ పవర్స్ ఉండాలి, అన్లిమిటెడ్ అబ్సల్యూట్ పవర్స్ అనేవి ఉండకూడదు. సో దట్ ఈస్ వెరీ మచ్ ఎసెన్షియల్ ఫర్ ద సిటిజన్స్ రైట్స్, ఫండమెంటల్ రైట్స్. And what are the prerequisites, how this constitutionalism can be achieved, we will see. So what are the prerequisites to achieve or to make the constitutionalism work? There should be certain basic prerequisites which we have discussed in the previous topic, called separation of powers. Separation of powers should be there. And similarly, there should be, already we have discussed, constitution. Constitution means there should be a rule of law, not rule of man. Not the rule of man. What is the difference between rule of law and rule of man? Rule of man is arbitrary. Arbitrary means man-made rules. Man-made rules means the man can change his rules according to the person. So whoever enters, according to my whims and fancies, I can change the law. But whereas rule of law means the law is same for all. The law is same for, equally applicable for all the citizens. So that is, rule of law should be there. And independent judiciary should be there, because in order to protect fundamental rights of the citizens, fundamental rights should be given to the citizens. In order to protect the rule of law and fundamental rights, there should be independent judiciary. We have already seen independent judiciary should be there. And there should be civilian form of government. Within democracy, civilian control over the armed forces should be there. Civilians should have, means the government, democratically elected government should have all the control over the armed forces. Unlike in Pakistan, the armed forces under various army generals, they have assumed power. That is not civilian control. Civilian control of armed forces. And above all, the basic principle of democracy, what we call the popular sovereignty. people should be supreme. These are the popular sovereignty. These are the basic principles. If we structure the state, Indian state or whatever state, if we by following all these basic principles, we can achieve, or we can say that there is constitutionalism in our country. So these are the basic underlying principles upon which the constitution concept of constitutionalism is built. Not only there should be a constitution, and then not only there should be a constitutionally run government, but it should have limited powers and follow all these basic principles. Then only we can say there is constitutionalism in any particular country. With this, I am concluding the topic constitutionalism. Thank you.